Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me introduce myself to you before we start everything. I'm Melanie Cabang. Before we start discussing the topic that was assigned to each of us, let us first give you an energizer so we don't get sleepy while we discuss our topic later. So you already have an idea for the energizer that we're going to do because you already see it in the slide, and we're going to call it guess the word. I would like to invite all of you are here at the meeting to participate in answering because it will also serve as your recitations for today. Next slide, please. So moving on, of course, we will have instructions for what you're going to do that we don't get too confused. So the first instruction is you will be given clues, hints in order for you to guess the word, but if you know the answer right away, when you see the missing letters, you can just raise your hands or click the raise hand button. But if no one raises their hand, I'm afraid to say I'll just call someone to answer because our time is limited and we will not let the time run out of a single item that is not answered. So for each hidden word, I will give you clues or hints so that you can have an idea of what we are looking for. So just have to listen carefully. And second, you will be given 30 seconds to 1 minute to try and guess the word. And please take the next slide, Ms. Nicole. Yeah. Next slide. Yeah. Who wants to guess? Word. Oh, yes, Miss Catalan.
Is it traditional literature?
Yes, you got it right, Miss Catalan.
Thank you.
And next slide, please. Yes, that's the answer, traditional literature. So let's go to the next slide. Yes, take a look here. We are looking for a word. So once again, no one. So other than Miss Catalan, who wants to answer? You again, Miss Catalan. Wait. No one. Just guess. Okay, I will give you a clue for you to answer. So the first clue for our first word is that it is the process of judging or calculating the quality of importance or value of something. And it's obvious in the second word, you don't need a clue for that. That was so easy. So for the clue for our third word is that it is the action or fact carefully choosing someone or something that as being most suitable. Who wants to guess? Oh, yes, Miss Davy. Yes, Miss Davy.
Evaluation and selection.
Yeah, that's the right answer. So next slide, please. Yes, evaluation and selection. Next, please. Yes, the easiest of all. Wants to guess what is that word? Aside from Miss Davy, wants to try to answer. Aside from Miss Catalan and Miss Davy, wants to try to answer. No one. So our clue for this word is like a category of people or things having common. Miss Flores, yes, answer.
Types po.
Oh yeah, but you got it right, Miss Flores. Next slide, please. So here, I think that's the last one. Does anyone want to answer? Anyone wants to answer? Aside from Miss Flores, Davy, and Miss Catalan, who want to answer? Oh, yeah, wait. Miss Gerald Seryoso?
Storytelling po.
That. But next slide, please. So the correct answer is storytelling. So that's the last part for this energizer. I hope you enjoyed it and wake up somehow. Thank you very much to all of you, especially those who participated. So now let's go to our discussion. Next slide. Yes. Once again, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to all these presentations. And at this meeting, we would like to have a presentation about traditional literature. And this is the topic that will be discussed, what has been assigned to us. And I expect that everyone will listen and until the end of the presentation, okay? And next slide, please. Yes, before the presentation begin, allow me to introduce again the discussants. First, yours truly, Kabangunay. Next are Miss Gacho and Miss Rendon. Next slide, please. So here are objectives. At the end of the learning period, the student should be able to define and describe the traditional literature, understand the significance of traditional literature, evaluation and selection, recognize and describe the various types of traditional literature, and the students will learn the proper and effective methods of storytelling. Next slide. So this is our table of contents, definition and description of traditional literature, evaluation and selection of traditional literature, types of traditional literature, and the last one is storytelling in the classroom. Next slide. Yeah, so who wants to read the definition and description of traditional literature? Yes, go Ms. Cardino.
Yes, traditional literature definition and description. Traditional literature is the body of ancient stories and poems that grew out of the oral tradition of storytelling before being eventually written down. Having no known or identifiable authors, these stories and poems are attributed to entire groups of people or cultures.
Okay, thank you for that, Miss Carolina. And other than what you read, what do we mean when we say traditional literature? When we say traditional literature, we always remember that traditional literature is a genre that deals specifically with stories that were passed down through oral storytelling from generation to generation, or narrative stories that are passed down from one group to another, history from different cultures. It also consists of songs, stories, poems, and riddles, and there are many forms of traditional literature which we will discuss later. So let's go back to the definition of description of traditional literature. So traditional literature, it is said that has no known or identifiable author. So these stories and poems are attributed to entire groups of people or culture. Why it is said that traditional literature has no known or identifiable authors? Because traditional literature originated orally and has no identifiable author, and much of traditional literature is attributed to entire groups of people or cultures because it was told and retold with details varying depending on audience and context. Although some of traditional stories are told as cultural or spiritual spiritual thought truths, or contain factual elements, and most considered fantasy. Next slide. Who wants to read what's on the slide? Yes, Miss Balagot, please read.
These stories have been preserved over time. They provide insights into the underlying values and beliefs of particular cultural groups, and opportunities or comparisons across cultures. Most are considered imaginative stories that provide a window into human nature and cultural beliefs.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Balagot. As what you have read, these traditional stories also provide the basis for many works of modern literature and drama. And so children need a strong background in these stories to bring to their later literary experiences. Next slide. So traditional literature includes several different types of stories, but because they were all shared orally for so long, they have many features in common, like as plot, action, characters, setting, themes, literary style, and endings. And so that we can better understand why these have many features in common, I will explain it. So look at the slide in the plot. Next slide. So here, the plots or the elements are simple but unchanging. So plots are organized pattern or sequences of events that make up a story. So they are short, simple, and direct, but the essential disappear during countless retellings, and they are typically simple in structure and usually unfold sequentially. And action. Next is action. So action is concentrated and fast-paced, provoke interest, or in fast-paced adding interest. That simple action is. So next is characters. Characters are two-dimensional and easily identified as good or bad, and usually the characters are stereotypes, all evil or all good, very foolish or very wise. As we move ahead, next slide, please. So the next is settings. So the settings are unimportant and big. In the beginning, the opening line is formulaic or as it has been used many times in similar situations such as phrase once upon a time. Next is themes. Themes are limited. Good overcomes evil, and etc. As an example, good overcomes evil, and the small and the powerless overcomes the powerful explanations for the ways of the world. It is one vital element of traditional literature and transmit cultural values. Thus, kindness, courage, intelligence, and hard work are rewarded. Evil is overcome even by people who think they are powerless. Next is literary style. Literary style is characterized by standard beginnings and endings derived from the oral tradition. The literature in this genre carries the cadence and expression of its original culture, such as the phrase once upon a time, and recurring features such as repeated phrases like mirror, mirror, and the wall. And the last one is endings. Endings are almost always happy, and the folklore is still being created, particularly in cultures and countries where oral tradition remains an important means of communication. And yes, plot, action, characters, setting, themes, literary styles, and endings are the several different types of stories. Next slide. So as we move ahead, we will see here that the classification of traditional literature can be confusing. So I will discuss this briefly before we go to the types of traditional literature later so that we can understand it better. So classification of traditional literature can be confusing. For instance, not everyone uses the same terms when referring to certain types of traditional stories. Also, modern stories were written by no-known authors in the style of traditional ones, but in the ancient times, and unknown origins are therefore not traditional in the strict sense, and the following terms are commonly used when referring traditional literature. So in traditional literature, the entire body of stories passed down from ancient times by the oral tradition is called literature, and the term folk tales is sometimes used synonymously with traditional literature, but we see it as subcategory. So in the told tale, next is told tale, a version of tale written in a style that will appeal to um, contemporary audience but otherwise remain true to the ancient tales. And the last one is variant. A variant is a short story that shares elements of plot or character with other stories and therefore belongs to the same story family but differs mainly by culture. So next slide. Next slide. Oh, I think that's the last slide for the definition and description of traditional literature. I hope you learned something about what traditional literature is. Let me introduce to you the next discussant for this presentation. We will discuss the evaluation and selection of traditional literature. May I call on Ms. Gacho? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kabangunay, for your wonderful explanation. So now, let's proceed to the evaluation and selection. Now, for the evaluation and selection, 4,000 years of people of all ages were intended audience or traditional stories in our scientific enlightened time. The stories have been relegated to children because of their use of supernatural in magic. The following list of evaluation was developed general child audience in mind. So now let's proceed to the first evaluation and selection. Next slide, please. So first, I would like to read the first evaluation and selection. All right. So first, for the traditional types of literature, traditional tales should keep the narrative or storytelling even when they have been written down style and should have narration-like tone. So first, for the evaluation and selection, although the story or yung script mo sa pag-narrate ng story is already written na, hindi na dapat siya magmukhang binabasa lang. You need to narrate it the way of narration tone. Next slide, please. Number 2, a traditional tale should retain the character of its origin, culture, or country by using odd speech patterns, a few foreign vocabulary, or proper names typical to the culture. So, second, a traditional tale should retain the characteristics of the culture or nation from which it organized by utilizing speech patterns, some foreign words, or culturally specific proper names. Dapat panatilihin ng isang traditional story ang katangian ng pinagmulan or the culture of it o bansa nito, the way of using different or kakaibang pattern ng pagsasalita. Ilang foreign vocabulary para mas maintindihan at ma-explore ang isip tungkol sa pinagmulan or culture ng countryng pinanggalingan, and of course mga correct names na karaniwan sa kultura. Mahalaga na may pagkakakilanlan pa rin ang pinagmulan, of course. Third, next slide, please. For the third evaluation and selection, in illustrated versions, text and illustration must be high quality and illustration must match the tone of text, and help to capture the essence of the culture of origin. Third, sa illustrated version sa traditional tale, we must need to have a high quality while doing illustrating. Syempre dapat tumutugma sa tono ng teksto at tumulong upang makuha ang kakayanan ng kulturang pinagmulan nito. Next slide, please. So number 4, traditional tales employ a simple but rich literary style. Even very young children are fascinated by chants, stylistic flourishes, and colorful vocabulary that are characteristic of masterful storytelling. Di ba kahit maging napakabata pa lang na mga bata, they should be happy sa mga pag-awit, and of course, the colorful vocabulary. Nakatangian ng mahusay na pagkukwento. Kinakailangan ito upang mas maaliw ang mga nakikinig at ganahan sila until the end of the story. So let's proceed to the last evaluation and selection. Next slide, please. So for the last part of evaluation and selection, in evaluating collections of traditional literature, consider the number of variety of tales in collection and the quality of reference aids such as table of contents and index. So sa mga pagsusuri ng mga collection or traditional literature ay kailangan pa rin nating isaalang-alang yung iba't ibang kwento tulad ng mga contents at mga index. If you're going to evaluate, you need to check it mabuti para malaman if maayos or tama ba yung mga ginawa mo. So now let's proceed to the types of traditional literature. Next slide, please. So I hope you've learned about the evaluation and selection. So for the types of traditional literature, next slide please. So types of traditional literature is important because traditional literature is passed down from generation to generation. It can provide readers with insights into the world's various cultures. Its primary function is to provide entertainment. However, important themes are frequently found in traditional literature. So for the first types of traditional literature, next slide please. Okay, next slide, please. So for the first type of traditional literature is myths. A myth, the word myth is derived from the Greek word for story, mythos. Myths are legends having religious and cultural undertones that have been passed away down orally. Myth is a legendary or traditional story that often revolves around an event or hero with or without the use of factual or legitimate reasoning. So, a myth is a story that is frequently narrated in traditional literature and seeks to explain why something is the way it is. For instance, a creation myth is narrative that describes how the world came to be. You may have studied mythology about gods and goddesses who fight and trick one another from ancient Greece or Rome. Syempre, di ba? So, may mga iba't iba kayong napapanood sa mga myths, like kagaya na lang ng example niyan, yung Beast Olympus. So in myths, supernatural heroes or gods are frequently the major characters, of course. The story take place in the past. These tales were recounted by person who thought they were true. Additionally, myths frequently provided an explanation for a natural phenomenon or human behavior. In mythology, a metamorphosis, a change is form of shapes occurs frequently. So now let's proceed to the next types of traditional literature. And epics. An epic is a lengthy narrative poetry that recounts heroic exploits. The phrase refers to both spoken and written compositions in literary usage. So the picture, as you can see, ayan po yung example ng epics na picture. So the epic has changed over time to accommodate many languages, cultures, and religious beliefs. Example na lang sa epics, in Don Juan and the Rape of the Lock, poets like Lord Byron and Alexander Pope utilized the epic comedic effect. So, tulad din nung sa Beowulf, the Fairy Queen by Edmund Spenser. So, in various civilizations such as Norse mythology, as well as more recently Finnish methodology, mythological traditions had been formalized through the use of epic literature. So now may I call on the next reporter for the next types of literature, traditional literature.
Your mic, please.
Naka-off yata yung
Legends. So, yeah. So, legends came from the word legenda, which means for things to read, and legend is a narrative that is partly true and partly imaginary about a particular person, event, place, or natural feature. It is said that legends are stories based on either real or supposedly real individuals in their marvelous deeds and legendary characters such as Robin Hood in legendary settings such as Camelot. They are tantalizing mix of realism and fantasy. Although the feats of the heroes of legends defy belief today and in ancient times, and these stories were considered factual. And these are quite similar to folk tales in content. They may include supernatural beings, elements of mythology, or explanations of natural phenomena, but they are linked with a particular locality or person and are told as a matter of antiquity because of their length, seriousness, and complexity. Legends in general are often suitable for middle graders, and legends may be based upon people or events of historical significance, and their physical characteristics are human and typically secular rather than religious. Next slide, please. So here, and after Miss Gacho and I discussed the myths and legends, I'd like to read the differences between myth and legend. So a myth is an interpretation of nature, and myths are stories in which gods and goddesses and other divinities play a part, while a legend is the idealization of history and stories of wonders or miracles not only of gods and goddesses but about animals. And these are just a few of the differences between myth and legend. Next slide, please. So now we've seen here the last type of traditional literature that I'm going to discuss, which is tall tales. Today we tell a traditional American story called the tall tale. Now let's take a look at the meaning of tall tales. use tall tales to describe something as being greater or larger than it really is. And tall tales are humorous stories that feature superhuman accomplishments and may be based on a real person's life. Tall tales are also highly exaggerated accounts of the exploits of people, both real and imagined. So they may be considered as subcategory of legends, also fictional heroes and heroines based upon real people. When it is said that tall tales can be based on real people or completely made up, just like the picture you see on the screen. That's the tall tale of Paul Bunyan. That's an example of tall tale. Either way, the character is described in hyperbolic way that makes them seem unbelievably heroic. So and well, I have now come to the end of my presentation. I hope you all learned something from what we discussed. I now call upon the next discussant, Ms. Rendon, to discuss the remaining types of traditional literature and teach us the proper and effective methods of storytelling in the classroom. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you so much for the discussions with providing informative and knowledgeable discussion. So again, I am Ms. Rendon and I will be discussing the next types of traditional literature. So the next type is fables. So fables or in Tagalog is fabula. I know a lot of us is familiar with this since high school or elementary. We always heard it usually in our Filipino subject and English. So fables are a story in which natural elements such as trees, plants, animals, wind, and many more are made into characters and personified with human characteristics. So fables are generally short in length and often include humor, symbolism, and fewer characters that other types of traditional literature has. So one of the well-known example of fables is the tortoise and the hare, or in Tagalog is yung kuneho at ang pagong. So I know most of us is familiar with the story which the hare mocks the tortoise for his slowness. So the tortoise challenged him to a race. Though the hare is stronger and faster, he lets his pride and overconfidence get in his way. So in this story, yung pagong is the one who win the race because the the hare let his pride and overconfidence get in his way. Like yung idea niya is he will win the race because he is stronger and faster than the tortoise. So concluding to the readers that perseverance is more worthy than speed or strength. So we can notice in the story that it contains limited characters and it used animals as a character which they were personified with human characteristic. So next slide. All right, so for the next slide, folktale. So I know a lot of us is familiar with this one also. Folktale is well known for its concept of characters that is either good or evil. Folktales often romantic and always fictional. These stories usually occur long ago or in far away land and once upon a time. Folktales stories are enchanted creatures like witches, giants, dwarfs, dragons, and fanciful settings like castles or forests. Common characteristic including reoccurring numbers, royalty, and of course the happily ever after ending. And one of the best example of folktale is Cinderella. I know majority of us is well known the story of the Cinderella or the plot of the story. So Cinderella began in the late 17th of century. And I did a research on who is the original author of this story. And according to the article that I've read about history of Cinderella, the original author is Charles Perrault. So Cinderella, a beautiful girl enslaved by her evil stepmother and stepsister, She longs for a better life. When her fairy godmother appears to grant her a wish, Cinderella meets the prince in the royalty ball who saves her and marry her. So the lesson in the story is that kindness and love will triumph over selfishness and evil. Next slide. All right, so I think that will be all for the types of traditional literature. Our next topics is storytelling in the classroom. I know many of us is familiar with storytelling. I think I might be thinking that you guys already use storytelling to your niece or your siblings. So storytelling is used to entertain as well as educate students by using a story. It brings language learning, also enhancing the vocabulary of students. It also creates immersive experience that allows young learners to enjoy the language in interning way. I know we all once experienced that our teacher tell us a story and it really gives us a exciting mood and it gives us imaginative scenarios in our mind and made us think of the lesson of the story. Next slide. So it giving us a chance to visualize things. We tell stories because it is a way to bond and connect with one another. Teacher is the storyteller and the students are the listener. By listening to the storyteller, it allows students to analyze the story by knowing the events, characters, and the plot of the story. With with that students it gives us a chance to students to be more knowledgeable with the topic or what is the story all about, and it makes their active or more active or motivated with the discussion. And because since they provide the storytelling, they were able to bond and connect with one another by sharing their insights or perspective with the story. Next slide. Okay, so for on this part, of course, there is an advantage of telling a story in the class. So one of this is active listening of the students. It allows students to simply understand what being told by just listening. And of course we all know that is not very easy for a student to understand a story. It's still depending on how a teacher would be delivering it. So by just listening it could give them motivation, and also it give them an exciting mood to learn more about the story. And since a story was made to be creative and imaginative, it helps to set up the mood and motivate the student to focus more on the story. Also, storytelling was allows students to improve their reading skills. Of course, teachers give chance to its student to um, for them to let them share or read the story. So with that, it gives a chance for students to improve their reading skills and enhance their vocabulary. And I think that will be all for the storytelling. Next slide. Next slide again. All right, so since we already discussed what is storytelling on this topic, we will be discussing how to use storytelling in the classroom. So, of course, as a future educator, it is important for us to know what is this so that we could use it in the future, and also it will be our advantage. First, we use storytelling to introduce a new topic. Just like what we did, we don't really start with that telling a story, but we use a story to connect with our topic for you guys to visualize what is the topic all about. Commonly, English teachers or Filipino teachers are the one who use storytelling to introduce a new topic, which they share a story first, and afterwards they will be discussing the lesson of the story, which they will be going to connect it with the topic. Next slide. Can you please go back to the next slide? Oh, I all right, thank you. So for the next one, it is to illustrate a concept. So in our generation, we can easily provide a digital storytelling. So digital storytelling is like providing a picture or a video which contains the story. It's simply discussing or telling the story by using a graphics. You can use or check it on YouTube. You will be seeing a lot of digital storytelling there. And with the digital storytelling, which it simply discuss the story that we want to share with our student. In that way, di na tayo, it will not be hard on a teacher's end to share a story. Also, it is more convenient and creative because it provides a graphics or animation type of storytelling. And since it is creative, students can visualize the story not just by using their imagination. And lastly, storytelling used to enhance any subject. Storytelling is a powerful tool that can turn any lesson into an adventure, especially if the topic is kind of difficult to explain. Teachers use to tell a story that definitely works to make the student understand what is the subject or what is the topic all about. So especially in English, we all know that it is very hard for or difficult for a children to understand and read English. So teachers used to tell some English story which enhance the knowledge of students in English subject, or with them discovering a new word, it will allow them to enhance their vocabulary and reading skills also. So storytelling is more than just by telling a story. It provokes our emotions. It can make us laugh, cry, or feel happy or sad or even angry. It depends on the plot of the story. No? So it helps us to remember things as well as connect with others. So overall, it is a powerful method of communication that can help anyone relate or see the word from another's perspective. So to conclude our report, traditional literature, these stories have been preserved over time. They provide insights into the underlying values and beliefs, which windows into human nature and cultural beliefs. It varies in different type, which is the epic, myths, legends, tall tales, fables, and folktale. Most stories of this genre share common characteristics, especially characters archetypes, to help readers easily recognize the story. The story problem is characters are broken into clear good versus evil. Even if the characters are magical or non-human, the message of the story is always one that the majority of people can understand and value. To end our report, we would like you guys to have fun again. So we will be having a game, and I know majority of you are familiar with four picks, one words, but that is not our game. Our game is you guys will be guessing what is the picture all about. So just like in four picks, one word. Next slide and next slide again. Thank you. So this is our game. Guess the picture. So we will be providing four pictures where you guys will be thinking what would be the answer here. But no worries because I will be giving you a clue or hint by providing the meaning. What is the meaning of the answer? So on this part, it will be just a trial, so anyone can guess. Just type your answer in the chat box. It is the variety of the traditional literature that has been discussed. It is the myths, tall tales, legends, folktale, epics, and fables. So anyone who can guess, just type your answer on the chat box. All right, I think we got an answer from Miss Cardino. Her answer is types. So next slide for us to check if it's correct. I think it's correct. Yes, okay. Thank you very much for your answer, Miss Cardino. So the game mechanics will be, you will be guessing the word of that links the four features together in 1 minute, and each correct answer carries 1 point. No searching for answers online, please, and you guys should have fun. So next slide. So this is the real one now, because you will be gaining points here now. So are you guys ready? If you are ready, please kindly type number 3 on the chat box. All right, I am seeing multiple responses. Thank you so much. So next slide now. All right, so what the word that links these four pictures together? So the clue here is it is a lengthy narrative poetry that recounts heroic exploits. The praise refers to both spoken and written composition and literary usage. All right, I think we got an answer here now from Miss Cardino again. She is the one that was able to answer first. The answer is epics. Thank you so much. Next slide. All right, thank you. So next one is, what's the word that links these pictures together? So the clue here is these stories that have been passed down through the oral tradition and therefore have no known author. They are intended to be instructional for children and will often use repetitive phrases to engage younger audience members. Characters are generally very simple with clearly either good or bad. I am seeing multiple answer here. Thank you so much, guys, for being participative. So the first answer that we got is from Nizel, which is folk tales. Next slide for us to check if it's correct. All right, thank you so much for your answer, Miss Nizel. It's correct. Thank you. Next slide. Alright, so for the next slide, what would be the answer? Can anyone guess? The clue here is it is a story of wonders or miracles, not only of God and goddesses, but also about animals. It is the idealization of history. I think we got an answer here now from Miss Balagot. Thank you so much. Next slide, please, for us to check if it's correct. All right, it is correct. Thank you so much. Next slide. All right, who can guess this answer? The clue here is stories about nature in which the natural elements, trees, plants, animals, or wind are made into characters or are personified with human characteristics. Wow, I am seeing multiple answer here. I think the first one is who was able to answer is Miss Balagot. Thank you so much for your answer. Next slide for us to check if it's correct. All right, thank you so much. Your answer, Miss Balagot, is correct. Thank you guys for your participation. Next slide. All right, I think that will be all for our report. Thank you guys for your participation and thank you for attending our discussion. And I think that will be all for our part. We don't want to take much of your time. Thank you and have a nice day, everyone.